For nearly a decade, Fast and Loud was the undisputed king of automotive reality television. The formula seemed bulletproof. Richard Rawlings, the charismatic, fast-talking owner of Gas Monkey Garage in Dallas, Texas, would scour the country in search of forgotten classic cars. He and his crew, led by the bearded mechanical genius Aaron Kaufman, would then perform high-stakes against-the-clock restorations, turning piles of rust into roaring, six-figure machines. The show, which premiered on Discovery Channel in June 2012, wasn't just about cars. It was about high drama, big personalities, and the thrill of the deal. It was cable television gold. So, when Discovery abruptly pulled the plug in May 2020, fans were left stunned. The cast went silent, and rumors flew faster than a souped-up Mustang. What really happened behind the scenes at Gas Monkey Garage? The truth is a story involving million-dollar contract restrictions, irreconcilable personality clashes, and the slow, grinding burnout of a business empire that grew far too big, far too fast. This is the untold story of how America's favorite car show crashed and burned. For years, everything looked perfect on camera. Gas Monkey Garage was a thriving business flipping cars, Richard Rawlings was living his rockstar mechanic lifestyle, and the ratings kept climbing. But behind those garage doors, the engine was already cracking long before the final episode aired. The show's early success was built on a foundation of genuine chemistry. Rawlings was the flamboyant frontman, a natural salesman who could talk his way into any deal and charm any camera. Kaufman was his perfect foil, the quiet, meticulous mechanic whose skills spoke for themselves. Together, they represented the yin and yang of car culture, the businessman and the craftsman. Audiences loved watching them bicker, negotiate, and ultimately create automotive masterpieces. The show's format was deceptively simple, but brilliantly effective. Each episode would begin with Richard finding a forgotten gem, often in a barn or junkyard, negotiating a rock-bottom price, and bringing it back to the garage. Then, the real magic would happen as the crew worked against impossible deadlines to restore the vehicle, often discovering hidden problems that threatened to derail the entire project. The heart and soul of the show, Aaron Kaufman, the quiet, meticulous mechanic who had been with Richard since day one, was growing increasingly uncomfortable. Around 2016, his on-screen enthusiasm began to fade, replaced by forced smiles and tense exchanges with Rawlings. Production crew members later noted the shift in energy between the two men who had built Gas Monkey Garage from the ground up. What started as creative differences over car builds slowly evolved into a fundamental disagreement about the future of the company itself. The tension wasn't just about personality clashes or creative vision. It was about fundamental business philosophy. Aaron had joined Gas Monkey when it was still a small operation, a time when every car mattered and quality was the primary concern. He had built a reputation on doing things right, even if it took longer or cost more. His approach was rooted in craftsmanship and the technical challenge of complex builds. His Instagram posts from that era showed genuine pride in detailed shots of custom fabrication that demonstrated real skill. Richard, meanwhile, had caught the entrepreneurial bug hard. He saw Fast and Loud as a launching pad for a massive lifestyle empire, not just a television show. The garage was becoming a brand, and brands need to think about profit margins, efficiency, and growth metrics. These conflicting visions created daily friction. Aaron would advocate for spending extra time on a build to get the details perfect. Richard would push for faster work to meet production deadlines and maximize profits. What viewers saw as entertaining banter about timelines was actually a deep philosophical divide about what Gas Monkey Garage should represent. By early 2017, the tension reached a breaking point. Aaron announced his departure, telling Rawlings, "I had some time off, and I think I got some other things, some other cats I want to skin. I have to go my own way." While both men attempted to keep things professional, industry insiders knew the split was far from amicable. In interviews, Kaufman later revealed the pressure was immense. "I wanted to build cars that were big," he said, and then TV needed cars that were much smaller, adding that there were growing personal issues and professional differences of opinions. Rawlings admitted as much, stating he was unhappy, and I was unhappy because he was unhappy. The truth was even starker. Rawlings later confessed the two were never really friends, remarking, "He was just my employee. We didn't hang out outside of work." This revelation shocked fans who had bought into the on-screen friendship. The heart of Fast and Loud had just walked out the door, and the show would never quite recover that original magic. Fans immediately sensed the difference when season 13 premiered without Aaron. The dynamic had fundamentally changed, and no amount of editing could hide that loss. Various cast members were brought in to fill the void Aaron left, but none of them had the same natural rapport with Richard that made the original dynamic work. Viewers consistently compared everyone to Aaron and found them lacking. However, Aaron's departure was just the first domino to fall. The real pressure crushing the show was coming from an even more relentless force, the impossible production schedule. Discovery Channel loved Fast and Loud's ratings, and they demanded more content faster. What viewers didn't realize was the brutal reality of pumping out over 150 episodes across 15 seasons in just 8 years. That's not counting the various specials and crossover episodes with other Discovery shows. The production demands went far beyond what appeared on screen. Each episode required extensive planning, multiple camera crews, countless hours of footage that needed reviewing, and constant coordination between the production company, Discovery executives, and Gas Monkey staff. A single car build that might take 3 weeks in reality would generate dozens of hours of raw footage, which editors would then compress into 42 minutes of television. This meant cameras were constantly rolling, capturing everything from mundane parts ordering to dramatic deadline crunches. Former employees spoke anonymously about the sheer burnout. Mechanics were working 60 to 80-hour weeks trying to meet both the actual business demands and the artificial deadlines created for television drama. Several staff members left the garage specifically because of burnout, though these departures were rarely addressed on the show. The turnover rate at Gas Monkey was significantly higher than typical automotive shops, which usually retain skilled mechanics for years or even decades. The production company pushed for more drama, more conflicts, more reasons for viewers to tune in next week. Producers would sometimes encourage confrontations or ask cast members to replay disagreements with more emotion. This is standard reality television practice, but it added another layer of artificiality to what was already a high-pressure environment. Mechanics found themselves not just doing their jobs, but also performing storylines that producers believed would boost ratings. Former employees spoke about the psychological toll this took, describing how it became difficult to separate genuine workplace frustrations from manufactured drama. Richard Rawlings was essentially working 3 full-time jobs simultaneously. He was running Gas Monkey Garage, managing his expanding business empire, and performing for cameras that followed his every move. The man barely slept, surviving on energy drinks and adrenaline. Former associates mentioned Richard would sometimes work 20-hour days, catching a few hours of sleep before starting again. His social media posts from those years show someone constantly in motion, flying between business meetings, making appearances at car shows, and somehow still running the garage. The stress wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Rawlings later admitted the constant pressure of performing for millions of viewers was overwhelming. He had to maintain a specific persona, the brash, confident dealmaker who never backed down. This character was close to his real personality, but the constant performance of it, day in and day out, was exhausting. There was no room for weakness, no space for vulnerability. The cameras captured everything, and any moment of doubt or fatigue could be edited into a storyline about his competence as a leader. But a man can only run on fumes for so long. The pace of the show was unsustainable for everyone involved. The production team was similarly stretched thin, working brutal hours to meet delivery deadlines for episodes. Crew members would often work 14-hour days, then return to edit footage late into the night. The relentless pace created a culture of burnout that affected everything from the quality of the builds to the chemistry between cast members. By the later seasons, even casual viewers could sense something felt off. The build seemed rushed, the drama felt scripted, and the genuine camaraderie that made early episodes so watchable had been replaced by forced interactions designed to hit specific story beats. Online forums began filling with complaints about how the show had changed, with longtime fans pointing to specific moments that felt staged or storylines that seemed manufactured purely for drama. Yet, even as the show lost its soul, Richard was busy building something that would ultimately compete with the show itself. He wasn't content with just having a successful television program. He wanted to build an empire, and he attacked that goal with the same aggressive energy he brought to everything else. Gas Monkey Bar and Grill opened in Dallas in 2013, followed by additional locations and a whole range of branded merchandise. There was Gas Monkey energy drinks, clothing lines, and various licensing deals that put the monkey logo on everything from car parts to beer koozies. What Richard didn't realize was that every dollar and minute invested in his empire was pulling him further away from what made him famous in the first place. The restaurant concept was ambitious from the start. Richard envisioned a chain of establishments where car culture met nightlife, complete with live music, craft beer, and walls covered in automotive memorabilia. The Dallas location became a legitimate tourist destination, drawing Fast and Loud fans from around the world. The success of that first location convinced Richard that he'd found his next big venture. He announced plans for Gas Monkey locations across the country. A second restaurant opened at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport in 2014. Another location was planned for Kansas City, with Richard doing promotional appearances and building local excitement for the upcoming opening. This expansion strategy made business sense on paper. Richard was leveraging his television fame to build multiple revenue streams that would outlast any single show. But it also meant his attention was divided in too many directions. The garage that made him famous was becoming just one piece of a larger corporate puzzle, and fans could feel the shift in priorities. The merchandise operation expanded rapidly as well. You could buy Gas Monkey t-shirts, hats, stickers, posters, and various automotive accessories. Richard partnered with energy drink companies to create branded products. There were licensing deals with companies producing everything from car care products to gaming accessories. Each deal made financial sense individually, but collectively, they represented a massive time commitment for someone also trying to run a garage and star in a television show. The television show that was supposed to be about building cool cars had become a promotional vehicle for Richard's various business ventures. Episodes increasingly featured plugs for the restaurant or whatever new product line was launching that month. Characters would casually mention grabbing food at Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, or shots would linger on branded merchandise in the background. What started as authentic content about car culture began to feel like one long commercial, and viewers noticed. Online forums filled with complaints about how the show had lost its way, becoming more about Richard's ego and business ambitions than the actual craft of restoration. Some of Richard's business ventures succeeded, others failed spectacularly. The proposed Gas Monkey restaurant location in Kansas City never materialized despite significant investment and promotional build-up. The costs of expansion proved higher than anticipated, and some markets didn't embrace the concept as enthusiastically as Dallas had. Various product lines came and went without making much impact, leaving warehouses full of unsold merchandise that represented sunk costs. The financial pressures of maintaining multiple businesses created immense stress that affected the show. Richard needed Fast and Loud to succeed, not just for the show itself, but because it drove traffic to his restaurants and products. Decisions about which cars to build or which storylines to pursue were increasingly influenced by what would benefit the broader Gas Monkey brand rather than what would make compelling content. The television landscape was shifting rapidly during Fast and Loud's run, and Discovery Channel was trying to adapt to changing viewer habits. Streaming services were pulling audiences away from traditional cable, and the network needed to rethink its entire programming strategy. Shows that once delivered reliable ratings were suddenly underperforming as younger viewers cut their cable subscriptions entirely. And in the boardrooms where these decisions get made, Fast and Loud was becoming a problem. The numbers told a stark story. Cable television viewership was declining across all demographics, but the drop was particularly dramatic among viewers aged 18 to 34. This was exactly the audience that advertisers paid premium rates to reach, and their disappearance threatened the entire economic model that supported cable networks. Discovery's solution was to invest heavily in specific franchises they believed could survive the streaming transition. They poured resources into shows like Gold Rush, Deadliest Catch, and various survival programs. These shows had proven track records, dedicated fan bases, and formats that executives believed could transition to streaming platforms. Discovery was essentially picking winners and losers within their own programming lineup, deciding which shows would receive continued investment and which would be allowed to wind down. Fast and Loud was caught in this corporate reshuffling, and the network's enthusiasm for the show began cooling around 2017. The show was profitable and delivered decent ratings, but it wasn't among Discovery's chosen franchises for the future. Executives began viewing Fast and Loud as a legacy program that had served its purpose rather than a cornerstone of their future strategy. Behind the scenes, negotiations between Richard Rawlings' team and Discovery executives were getting complicated. Richard wanted more money and more creative control, arguing that the show's success entitled him to better terms. His representatives pushed for higher per-episode fees, better profit participation, and more say over creative decisions like editing and storyline development. Discovery wanted to reduce costs and maintain tighter oversight of their productions. The network was under pressure from corporate leadership to improve profit margins while also investing in new programming. Giving Richard everything he wanted would set expensive precedents for other shows and personalities. These aren't unusual tensions in television production, but they came at a time when both sides had less patience for compromise. The network had other shows to focus on, and Richard had other business interests that didn't require Discovery's involvement. Production budgets got tighter, which meant less money for builds and smaller crews. The show that once had resources to tackle ambitious projects like building a vintage Ferrari or restoring a rare muscle car was now being asked to focus on more common vehicles that cost less to acquire and restore. This financial pressure showed up on screen in subtle ways. Builds became simpler, the cars featured were less exotic, and the overall production value declined compared to earlier seasons. Viewers who'd been watching since the beginning could see the difference, even if they couldn't articulate exactly what had changed. The financial analysis was brutal. Each episode of Fast and Loud cost approximately $150,000 to $200,000 to produce, factoring in crew salaries, equipment, insurance, and the cost of cars and parts. The show generated revenue through advertising and international distribution deals, but those numbers were declining as viewership fell. When Discovery executives ran the projections, they concluded that continuing Fast and Loud meant significant opportunity costs, money that could be invested in new programming with better long-term prospects. Contract negotiations for what would have been season 16 never gained serious momentum. Both sides went through the motions, but neither Richard nor Discovery showed much enthusiasm for continuing. Richard's team asked for terms the network wasn't willing to meet. Discovery offered conditions Richard found unacceptable. But the final nail in the coffin wasn't just about money or ratings, it was about a fundamental loss of freedom for its star. In December 2020, Richard Rawlings appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience and finally revealed the true, unvarnished reason the show ended. In a candid and explosive interview, he admitted that he was exhausted and wanted to pursue new ventures, specifically starting an automotive podcast. The problem? His Discovery contract was incredibly restrictive. "I signed off on all media," Rawlings told Rogan, revealing that he had signed away control of his social media and other business opportunities nearly a decade prior, before the rise of the modern social media landscape. At one point, he even had a $25,000 penalty clause in his contract for speaking negatively about the network. Rawlings explained that when he first signed with Discovery, social media didn't exist in any meaningful way, and the concept of direct-to-consumer content creation was unheard of. When I signed my deal with Disco was almost 10 years ago. Discovery didn't. Social media didn't exist hardly, he stated. So, I signed off on all media. This meant he was contractually obligated to go through Discovery for any media projects, podcasts, or social media ventures, effectively making him a prisoner of his own success. He was stuck in a creative rut, unable to grow his brand in the ways he wanted. The 2020 COVID-19 pandemic provided a moment of reflection, a perfect storm, as he called it, to step back and reassess his priorities. The restrictive nature of his contract extended beyond just social media. Rawlings described how Discovery had control over the music rights from the show, making it nearly impossible to release episodes on DVD or other platforms without paying exorbitant licensing fees. This meant fans couldn't easily purchase or own their favorite episodes, and the show's legacy was being strangled by corporate bureaucracy. He also revealed that Discovery's creative control had become increasingly suffocating, with network executives dictating everything from the cars they built to the storylines they pursued. Rawlings felt he had become more of an actor playing a character than a genuine garage owner, making decisions based on his expertise and passion. There were also personal factors that don't show up in corporate memos. Richard's personal life had been turbulent during the show's run, including multiple marriages and divorces that played out partially in public. The constant scrutiny that comes with television fame had taken a toll, and people close to Richard mentioned that he was ready for more privacy. The show required him to perform a specific version of himself, and maintaining that persona had become exhausting. The stress of constantly being on for the cameras, combined with the pressures of running multiple businesses, had pushed him to his breaking point. Rawlings admitted to Rogan that he was essentially a slave to Discovery, unable to pursue the projects that genuinely excited him or to build the media empire he envisioned. He wanted to tell stories and interact with fans on his own terms, but his contract made that impossible. By 2018, Richard Rawlings was exhausted from juggling too many responsibilities. The magic that made early episodes work had disappeared when Aaron left. To recapture that chemistry with other mechanics never quite clicked. Richard had also achieved his goal of building a business empire beyond the show. He no longer needed Fast and Loud the way he did in 2012 when it launched his career. The show had served its purpose, transforming him from a successful garage owner into a nationally recognized entrepreneur with multiple revenue streams. His restaurants were established, his merchandise was selling, and his personal brand was strong enough that he could maintain relevance without weekly television appearances. The show had become an obligation rather than a passion project. Discovery Channel was dealing with their own strategic challenges. They'd committed to focusing on specific franchises, and Fast and Loud wasn't among their chosen priorities. The show's ratings had declined from their peak, and more importantly, the demographic watching Fast and Loud skewed older, which worried executives trying to attract younger streaming audiences. The network had also shifted its focus more heavily toward natural history and exploration programming, with shows like Planet Earth and Blue Planet becoming flagship properties. Reality programming, while still profitable, was taking a backseat to prestige documentary content. The official announcement came in 2019, with both sides issuing polite statements, thanking each other and celebrating what they'd accomplished together. It was all very corporate and carefully worded, which is usually how these things end when lawyers are involved. What really sealed the show's fate was a combination of factors. The cost of producing Fast and Loud had increased, while the revenue it generated was declining. Television production is a business, and when the math stops working, shows get canceled. Fast and Loud had given Discovery years of solid content and helped Richard build his empire. But by 2019, the show had run its natural course. The format had been exhausted, the cast had moved on, and the audience was shrinking. Rather than drag out a messy public battle, everyone agreed to end things professionally. Richard Rawlings didn't slow down after Fast and Loud ended. He continued his business ventures, though with mixed results. Gas Monkey Bar and grill locations have opened and closed over the years. The original Dallas location remains open and continues attracting fans, but expansion efforts have been more modest than originally envisioned. That Kansas City location that was heavily promoted never opened. However, Rawlings found a new lease on creative life by launching his own YouTube channel and the Monkey Trap podcast. Freed from the shackles of his Discovery contract, he finally took control of his own media destiny, building a direct connection with his fans without the interference of network executives. His YouTube channel features behind-the-scenes content, car builds, and the unfiltered Rawlings that fans had always wanted to see. Gas Monkey Garage continues to operate, tackling even more ambitious and exotic builds than before. Without the pressure of television deadlines, the shop has returned to its roots, focusing on quality craftsmanship and innovative builds. Rawlings has also become more involved in charity work, using his platform to support various causes and giving back to the community that supported him throughout his television career. Aaron Kaufman launched his own show, Shifting Gears with Aaron Kaufman, which ran for 2 seasons on Discovery before also ending. The show focused on the complex, high-level builds he had always wanted to do, allowing him to showcase his technical expertise without the commercial pressures of Fast and Loud. He has since moved on to focus on his own shop, ArcLight Fabrication, where he builds custom vehicles without the pressure of television cameras. He appears to have found peace in his work, focusing on the craft he loves rather than the demands of television production. The split from Richard appears permanent, with both men rarely mentioning each other in interviews. Their relationship, which was always more professional than personal, has faded into the past. However, both have acknowledged the success they achieved together and the debt they owe to the show that made them famous. In the end, Fast and Loud didn't end because of one single, explosive conflict. It ended because the chemistry soured, the production demands became unsustainable, the corporate strategy shifted, and the star realized he had become a prisoner of his own success. Sometimes shows end not because they failed, but because they accomplished everything they set out to do. Fast and Loud had built something impressive, made everyone involved successful, and ended before it became a parody of itself. In television, that's actually a pretty good run. The legacy of Fast and Loud continues to resonate in the automotive community. It inspired a new generation of car enthusiasts, brought attention to the art of restoration, and proved that car culture could be compelling mainstream entertainment. The show's influence can be seen in countless other automotive programs that followed, and its episodes remain popular in reruns and on streaming platforms, introducing new audiences to the magic of Gas Monkey Garage. Richard Rawlings has moved on to new ventures, but he remains grateful for the opportunity Fast and Loud provided. In interviews, he often reflects on the journey with a mix of pride and relief. He built something extraordinary, watched it grow beyond his wildest dreams, and had the wisdom to walk away when the time was right. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the price of fame, the burnout of relentless production, and the sometimes crippling nature of corporate contracts, but also as an inspiration about the power of reinvention. What are your thoughts about how Fast and Loud ended? The story of this beloved show is a complex tapestry of business decisions, personal conflicts, and industry shifts. It reminds us that even the most successful television shows are ultimately businesses, and when the business stops making sense for both sides, the final episode is just a matter of time.